An impeachment of Donald Trump spearheaded by Republicans. That is how far we have gotten in the MAGA civil war. The House of Representatives is in all-out revolt, and there is nothing that Mike Johnson can do to stop it. And it all starts with Greenland. Republicans are furious that Donald Trump has put their party in the worst political position we have ever seen in the modern era. And right now, instead of helping them save their seats, he's focused on cutting checks to Greenland, which is why a Republican in the House is making a shocking announcement about Trump and impeachment that we are going to get into. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button because it goes a long way in supporting our work. Now, there are a million reasons to impeach Donald Trump less than a year into his presidency, but the one that is causing the most problems with MAGA right now is Greenland. And it starts with this report that Chris Hayes did on why Donald Trump is so obsessed with Greenland and why it is backfiring so badly on him.
The factual basis for this saber rattling is also completely nonsensical, even at just a kind of practical level. There is no national security need for us to control a country that is already our ally in the NATO alliance, part of U.S. missile defense for 70 years. In fact, we already have a military base in Greenland. And I'll confess, I didn't used to know that, but you know how I do know that? I know it because Vice President J.D. Vance went to that base last year, and I promise he knows it exists. Trump wants it, it appears, because, and this is the way he said it, it's important to him psychologically because it's big. He basically admitted as much to the New York Times. Ownership is very important, Trump said, as he discussed with a real estate mogul's eye the landmass of Greenland. When asked why he needed to possess the territory, he said, because that's what I feel is psychologically needed for success. I think that ownership gives you a thing that you can't do, whether you're talking about a lease or a treaty. Ownership gives you things and elements that you can't just get from signing a document. Now, the other part of this, and it's almost too stupid to spend time on, but we have to. He also likes how it looks on the map. I mean, look how, man, look at that. Look how big and strategically important it is. And this is a person who's got weird issues about bigness. But as you map nerds out there know, that is purely due to an optical illusion with the Mercator projection when it attempts to display a spherical planet on a flat map, as you can see in this GIF from geographer Jakob Nawasad. I mean, Greenland is pretty big, don't get me wrong. It is not continent-sized. And I honestly do think that's why Donald Trump wants it. That's a theory we've been kicking around for a while on this show.
Yeah, it's so sad for me to hear you say, I think it has something to do with the Mercator projection. Like that's where our politics have come to, that we have to think about the kind of maps that we are showing our imbecile president of the United States.
And so here we are. I mean, it's surreal. It's like a waking nightmare. So much of this period is. But we're near the precipice of what would be a totally unprecedented geopolitical crisis in the post-World War II era. I mean, it would move us off a period in history that is outside of the World War period of history and back towards that kind of world. Donald Trump could blow up NATO at any second, which of course would be a feature rather than a bug for this administration.
He literally doesn't understand how maps work, and now he wants to go to war. He doesn't understand how maps work, and he wants to go to war. That sounds like a cartoon king from a Disney movie set 1,000 years ago, not the current president of the United States. Stupidity has been a very obvious theme of this administration, and it has gotten us to some really dark places, but it's only going to get darker. And I don't think Donald Trump realizes that his MAGA supporters, or former MAGA supporters in the House, do not appreciate this. This is a man who ran on lowering costs, then exploded them, and is now telling America that they're going to have to pay $1 million per Greenlander so we can have a territory for Trump to put his name on with no real strategic objective other than, look at me, I'm the conqueror, I'm the king. And yeah, of course, Donald Trump, who believes that he is only governed by his own morality on the world stage, is happy to do whatever he wants. But there will be consequences, like the revolt that we're already seeing from the Senate, and the revolt that is coming in the House. According to Don Bacon, a Republican who already threatened to resign over Donald Trump's foreign policy, but is now threatening something worse for Trump and Mike Johnson. Republicans signal support for Trump impeachment. Nebraska Republican Don Bacon has blasted Donald Trump's talk of taking over Greenland, branding the idea as utter buffoonery and warning it could spark bipartisan impeachment efforts, underscoring deepening GOP fractures over Trump's foreign policy. Bacon warned, if he went through with the threats, I think it would be the end of his presidency. And he needs to know the off-ramp is realizing Republicans aren't going to tolerate this, and he's going to have to back off. He hates being told no, but in this case, I think Republicans need to be firm. It would be a total mistake to invade an ally. It would be catastrophic to our allies and everything. It's just the worst idea ever, in my view, he added. And it's not just Don Bacon. The Republican congressman said, I'll be candid with you, there's so many Republicans mad at this. If he went through with these threats, as he said, I think it would be the end of his presidency. Don Bacon is right. It would be the end of his presidency for so many different reasons. Now, do I necessarily think that if Donald Trump invaded Greenland, there would be a conviction to happen in the Senate? I don't know at this point. Let's be real. The Senate is just a mess. Republicans are bought and paid for. They are terrified of Donald Trump. But the House is a different thing right now. And it wouldn't just be the end of Donald Trump's term because of a looming threat of impeachment. It's because of what's to come. A midterms that will be a total wipeout for Donald Trump. But if we're worrying about whether or not our rogue president is going to invade with military force an ally that we can put more troops on their bases, so there's no basis for it. We know that. Then maybe we're past impeachment. Maybe we need to go further. Maybe we don't just need to consider it out loud. Maybe we need to move right now. If you're having to ask these questions, the fact that Republicans in the Senate, unfortunately not enough yesterday, which is not how it appeared before the vote, of course, some voted for the War Powers Act to restrict Donald Trump. If there are Republicans in the Senate of all places voting to restrict Donald Trump's powers, maybe we've gone too far, right? Is that not enough for y'all to acknowledge? I just really don't know how I do know how we've gotten to this point. But again, Trump must acknowledge, he must understand, I know he doesn't, or maybe he doesn't care, considering that he's now talking of canceling the midterms even more, that there are implications to this, that the person running on affordability can't then jack up prices and give a bunch of money to Greenland. This is not how this works. But these fractures are deepening in a way that, again, is going to cause more problems for Donald Trump. Because what's the big issue with an impeachment? What's the big issue with all of these questions being raised? What the big issue is with Mike Johnson being unable to control the House is that we've seen all of these discharge petitions come to the floor, right? We've had votes that Mike Johnson never wanted to happen. And why did Mike Johnson never want these votes to happen? Why didn't he want there to be votes on ACA subsidies, on their extension, which Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, who is one of the best legislators in the House, was able to get to a vote? Why is Mike Johnson so terrified of that? Because if the Senate passes it, doubtful, Donald Trump's going to veto it. We know he wants to kick people off his health care, but why is that so damaging? One, it represents the political weakness of Trump and Johnson, so it's just flat out embarrassing. But two, the reason Mike Johnson doesn't want votes is because then his Republicans have gone on the record, and it's just more fuel for the fire for Democrats to use against them. It's so often that in these big bills, which is the only way that Donald Trump likes to pass them because he can pack as much in as possible, and then Republicans can claim, well, I wasn't voting for that specific element of it. I was voting for something larger. You know, it's why they always include increases in pay for military service members, so they can say, well, Democrats, they're voting against the big, beautiful bill. They voted against the big, ugly piece of shit bill. They voted against pay increases for service members, right? They like to just add all that in to kind of excuse themselves. But on these individual votes, there is nothing that you can say. Remember when the Senate was having that vote-a-rama, and it was made so that the bill had to be read in full, right? Why did they do that? So that there could be no senator, as we saw Marjorie Taylor Greene to go on and say, after the bill was passed. But so there could be no senator who could say, well, I didn't know what was in the bill. I didn't have enough time to read the bill. The bill was too big. Hey, by the way, it's your job to read the legislation before you vote on it. But even Marjorie Taylor Greene, do you remember this? After the passage of that bill, she said, I didn't realize that there was this provision limiting the ability to regulate AI, making it illegal for states to regulate AI. Pam Bondi and the DOJ saying they're going after states that want to regulate AI. AI that is environmental terrorism, AI that is jacking up your electricity costs to the data centers that it needs, AI that is pushing kids to take their own lives, AI which is like revenge porn slop at this point. That AI, that useless technology invented to make the richest people in the world even richer, to steal jobs from working class people. That AI, Marjorie, you didn't realize is what Donald Trump wanted to protect. It seems like it's right up his alley. But let's get back to Don Bacon. Again, this just goes to show that Mike Johnson is no longer speaker. Right? He doesn't really have any power. He can't stop votes. He can't have votes. They've had to take so many votes off the floor this week alone because they don't know what their numbers are. And it gives someone like Don Bacon a tremendous amount of power. Right? It gives someone like a Thomas Massie a tremendous amount of power to do whatever they want, to say whatever they want. Hell, if we're worried about an impeachment going forward, there's literally no reason why Don Bacon wouldn't just say, well, I'm going to caucus with the Democrats. No reason. If he believes so strongly in impeachment, if Donald Trump invades Greenland, there will be no Mike Johnson blocking it. Don Bacon is retiring. So he's not going to become a Democrat, but he might say, do you know what? I'll caucus with the Democrats so that Hakeem Jeffries or whomever would be speaker and could carry forward an impeachment. There would be no Mike Johnson blocking it. These guys have nothing left to lose at this point. And this is a guy in Don Bacon who said that he was going to resign, that he thought about resigning after it came out that Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff were handing talking points to the Russians for negotiations over and into the war with Ukraine, which was supposed to be done on day one of the presidency, but really hasn't happened yet, has it? What a shock that is. But it is interesting in the context of all of this, if we're going to talk about Ukraine, and this is where I want to finish, because I know y'all don't need an explanation of why Donald Trump wants to go to war with Ukraine, not Ukraine, why Donald Trump wants to seize Greenland. I don't know what could happen next week. But it is very obvious that the line, oh, well, we have to worry about Russia. Well, what if Russia comes? First of all, we can put as many troops as we want on bases in Greenland. We haven't. Donald Trump has actually taken them away. But Donald Trump doesn't treat Putin like a threat. If he did, he would be more supportive of Ukraine. Donald Trump doesn't treat Putin as someone who is looking to conquer more land, right? That runs counter to the narrative he has presented about Ukraine. He says, well, Putin he's just hanging out. He's just big chilling, right? So the way that Donald Trump talks about Putin already is suggestive that he believes Putin's just there to hang, just there to have a good time. So how could that guy, who doesn't really care about land in Ukraine, who just wants it to be done, according to Trump, how could that guy be a threat to invade Greenland? None of it lines up, and it's not supposed to. That's not what it's about. It's not about a cohesive foreign policy strategy. Donald Trump can't even spell most of those words. It is about power. Let's be very clear about that, and let's call it out on the show every single day. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. If you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments.